Hey, leaders! In this episode of Leading Collaborative Response, Kurtis and I are joined by the Superintendent of Grasslands School Division, Scott Brandt, and the Principal of Bassano School, Brita Goldie. In the conversation, we explore how the division has implemented a collaborative response journey across all of its schools, the impact the work is having on students and staff, what it looks like in a K-12 within the division, and how the structures and processes have been utilized at the divisional level. Let's get started.
Leading organizations with intentionality and purpose is complex work, and dedicated leaders work tirelessly each and every day to build impactful cultures of collaboration. But effective collaboration is difficult and messy. The good news is you don't have to do it alone. Join the Jigsaw Learning team for Leading Collaborative Response, sharing insights for leaders committed to establishing, refining, and deepening collaborative response in their organization.
All right, welcome back. As always, I'm Kurtis Hewson, co-founder and lead learner of Jigsaw Learning, and with me is Lorna
Hewson.
Ditto.
Yeah, ditto.
And super excited to be able to have a conversation with Scott and Brita today around the work that is happening in Grasslands School Division as well as Bassano School. So welcome, Scott and Brita. It's great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having us, for sure.
Perfect. Now, it's going to seem like it's incredibly polished for the end listeners and viewers, but they may need to know this is our third attempt at trying to make this podcast happen. So thanks for the patience, although no one other than us really knows that we've had lots of practice already.
Well, now they know.
Yeah, I kind of let cat out of the bag with that. Okay, so Brita, first time for our viewers, third time for us. Can you share just a little bit of your educational background and what's brought you to where you are currently as the principal of Bassano School? And then we'll turn the attention to Scott to ask the exact same thing.
Sure. So I started my career about 15 years ago up north in a flying community called Fort Chip, and then moved south to Slave Lake area. And then about 5 years ago, was looking to move closer to family. So I ended up down in Grasslands at Bassano School, which is K-12, which has been my experience since I started my career. So I started with the Grasslands for 3 years as a vice principal, and then 2 years ago moved up to the principalship of the school and have been here ever since, and have been using collaborative response my whole time here.
So just kept moving south. What's your next move?
I go more south? Is it like United States after
I
this?
know.
I don't know.
Mexico.
Yeah, there we go.
Very south.
And Scott, we'll turn it over to you. Same thing. And I do want to kick off and start that you have a relationship with Lorna here that our listeners may not know about. Why don't you start with that and then take us away from there?
Sure, you bet. Yeah, I was very fortunate. I started my teaching career in Claresholm Elementary School, where Lorna was already teaching. And I was there for 8 years, and Lorna and I became kind of, I guess, the senior grade 3 teachers in the school. And we had tons and tons of fun together and lots of laughs. And so that was the start of a wonderful friendship, and obviously a relationship that has benefited over many years of continuing to work together. So yeah, very fortunate to have a great start in Claresholm.
We have lots of stories. I could share lots of stories.
Brita, just let us know if you ever need dirt on Scott, and we've got you covered.
Lorna only shares the good stories because I could also do the same.
It's always reciprocal.
Very reciprocal. Yeah. So this is my 7th year as a superintendent in Grasslands, and after leaving Claresholm, I came to Brooks mostly to be closer to family. And I was able to work in an elementary school here for about 6 years as a school administrator, as a vice principal, and then moved into central office as an assistant superintendent and deputy superintendent, and now as a superintendent of Grasslands, which is amazing work. Very fortunate to have amazing staff and very dedicated people looking after the needs of our kids. In terms of collaborative response, it was something we dabbled in back in 2015. Kurtis, you came and helped do a little bit of a presentation to some of our school admin, and we saw it kind of take flight in a few of our schools, but really lacked that consistency and fidelity, and which is why we've reached out to you over the last few years.
All right, and Scott, why don't we keep going just a little bit? Can you give the viewers or listeners that are joining us today. A bit of context for Grasslands because it's quite a unique school division within Southern Alberta. And then we'll ask for you to turn it over to Brita just to give a little bit of context for Bassano School as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Grasslands is a small rural jurisdiction with Brooks kind of being the hub, I guess. I guess what makes us more unique maybe than many rural divisions is just our diversity. We have lots and lots of cultural diversity and richness within the community of Brooks. We have a large meat packing plant, which brings people from all over the world into our community. Even outside of our city schools, we have diversity in terms of Brita School, for example. We have a large Indigenous population as part of a service agreement with Siksika Nation. Hutterite colonies, we have low German speaking Mennonite students. And so when you kind of throw all those things together for a small, rural jurisdiction, I guess for us, the diversity might be more representative of large metro centers and maybe even in some cases more diverse because they may not have to work through colonies and low German speaking Mennonite students. So it's a great division because of that diversity, but obviously it has some challenges in terms of the teaching side, which is where cloud responses come in.
Just to give this a little bit more context, Scott, you had shared with us previously of approximately how many languages are spoken within the community of Brooks. Can you share that with us again?
Yeah, so Brooks is called the city of 100 hellos. And so we have over 100 different languages and dialects spoken within our community. Many from Mideast, parts of West Africa, Asia, South America. Yeah, so it's a great place, but as I said, it comes with some challenges, and how do we support teachers to provide excellent learning opportunities for our students is paramount.
Excellent. So Brita, just give us a little bit of context of Bassano School then within Grasslands.
For sure. So kind of building on what Scott said, we're unique in Grasslands in that we have a fairly large Indigenous population. So we have 250 students total, up to 73 of them come to us from Siksika First Nation. So we're a little more unique that way, as well as we have the town of Bassano students, the farms around us, and then some lower German speaking Mennonite populations. So we're unique in that we're small, but we're incredibly diverse that way. And much like the Brooks schools have some unique challenges with just supporting all of our students who come from various locations.
That's awesome. And it does, you, as soon as you reflect on the idea that there's 100 languages, you automatically start to think about what challenges that would pose within your schools, and even communicating with your families and communicating with the kids in schools.
But
and
great opportunities.
But great opportunities as well. Yeah, for sure. That's so awesome. So just thinking about collaborative response then, Scott, you had mentioned that we had done a little bit of an intro a while ago, and then you came back to it. From that divisional perspective, what was it that actually drew you into, we need to come back to collaborative response, and we need to look at this as a full implementation across our district?
Great question. And it was something that I guess timing was really the essence for us. As I said, in 2015, we allowed our schools to kind of pick and choose what parts of collaborative response might fit into their own models. And so, we were seeing some schools, using RTI models or using portions of collaborative response mixed in with RTI. Our language wasn't common. Our processes were definitely not consistent and common. And so as we're trying to talk about supporting kids and the complexities that are obviously increasing in classrooms, that was a real driving force. We needed something systemically that we could all speak the same language and look at processes in a similar way. Secondly, is we were coming out of a pandemic, and learning disruption was a big part of what we were seeing. And at the same time, the government was implementing new assessments for learning loss in terms of literacy and numeracy. And so now we're using a lot of data. We've always kind of been moving towards data use, but it wasn't something that I would say we were very maybe as experienced and maybe as efficient with. And then really the third piece was just, we know that the increasing complexities in classrooms are challenging staff. And so how do we support staff in a way that allows them to have that sense of efficacy and support, knowing full well that we owe it to our students to obviously provide them with the best learning opportunities. So kind of those three forces all kind of came together at the same time. And when we were trying to figure out what might be the best way to approach this method or this need, it was really coming back to collaborative response as a systemic model.
Well, and Brita, I know that your coming to the school division was a little bit fortuitous as far as timing goes. Do you want to describe what that looked like for you?
For sure. So I actually saw Kurtis speak 8 years ago at Teachers Convention up north. my first year in admin, and I saw like the early programming for collaborative response and thought it was phenomenal. So I brought it to my K-12 school up north. When I came down to Grasslands, had seen similar issues between the schools I had worked in. So I brought it up to our staff here in Bassano. And interestingly enough, they had had a presentation, started using the collaborative response model in 2015 and moved away from it, but had loved it at the time. They had just different admin change, stopped using it as effectively. They had CTMs, but weren't quite using them with fidelity. So I had said, hey, let's do a book study. This was 5 years ago. We'd like get back on this, like learn more about it. So we had started the book study, started to move through it. And then when Grasslands announced, hey, we're looking at doing collaborative response as a division, my staff got really excited because we had been already starting on that process and we're like a couple of years ahead. So it just fit really naturally for us as a staff. And it kind of gives our staff a sense of success because we're that much further into using the model and they aren't learning it new like a lot of the people in the division.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think there is always that iterative nature of the work too, of you're always going to have to wrap back around because you're going to have transitions of staff, transitions of leadership that will require to revisit over and over
And
again.
we're growing and learning all the time.
Yeah.
So being able to implement and make adjustments as you go forward too.
The things I could have taught myself 8 years ago to make that teachers convention session even better for you would have been
Well,
really
we know
helpful.
now.
Yeah. So Scott, when you talk about moving out as a system, I once had a district leader use the analogy for me that I think stuck really well. He said, when I was the principal in a small school, and you know, this might replicate what Brita had said, that it was kind of like being on a jet ski. If I wanted to turn right, we had a conversation and boom, we turn right. Like we could move fairly nimbly and agile. And when he said he got into a larger school, now it was more like a sailboat or a yacht of you need to test the wind a little bit. You need to do a few calculations, really check where you're going. It's going to take a little while to make that turn. It's not as quick. And you learn as you're adjusting sails, what adjustments you need to make on the fly. And then said when he got into the system level, it was like leading an aircraft carrier that to make a turn, it took sophisticated operations. We had to do calculations. It would take forever to make the turn. You may not see the impact of it behind you for quite a while. It took everyone getting on board. And so I share that as a very long-winded way to get to a question around implementation. How have you envisioned that implementation process within Grasslands, and how have you gone about supporting, knowing that you do have diversity of schools in regards to configurations, populations, and even community contexts?
Well, and even speaking to some of the significant steps that you've made, is there anything that really stands out to you that was really important in that implementation?
Yeah. The aircraft carrier sounds like my world, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really, I guess, number one is I think everybody was kind of at a point. I think we had people at a common place that they were looking for something different. You know, we've always been talking about intervention and the need to support students, and our instructional framework as one of our key questions is, you know, what do we do when kids aren't responding or they've already learned it? And so we've been able to tie in our instructional framework into this piece. And I guess for us, it was, you need to kind of start with that leadership group and really build that capacity and that understanding really at a starting point where the people who are going to be doing that work supporting teachers have the best understanding possible in terms of the processes and the framework. And so really in year one, a lot of that work was just working with Kurtis and Lorna and our leadership team, you know, so school administrators, but we brought in our learning coaches. We had obviously our senior administration involved in it, our director of student support services, our early learning coordinator. So all those key people in our learning team that were going to be somehow involved in this process, just so that, again, common language, common understanding. And so year one for Brita and some of those other folks, it would have been a good review, but for many people, it was really just kind of an eye-opening experience of, okay, this is complex work, but if we do a good job of it, it'll make a difference. In year two, it was really about trying to refine processes. And so we spent a ton of time talking about collaborative team meetings, really looking at that as one of our key structures for, you know, looking at key issues and coming back to really strong universal programming within classrooms, kind of at that tier 1 and tier 2 level. And then year 3, this year, we've already tried to, I guess, move into specific areas where collaborative planning has become more important to us. Our SST meetings and our meetings at the division level have been restructured and rebranded to fit into the model. So for us, it was kind of starting small and really building that guiding coalition and then moving up to a level where we could expand it and support administrators in schools. If I was going to say there's one key thing that maybe has really helped us with this is last year, our board made a decision to change our school year calendar because we had, Brita can speak to this very specifically, we had some schools that because of sheer size and economies of scale, they could build in collaboration time or time for CTMs right into their daily schedule. Others had 0 time, and so it was all following outside of school hours. And so we've gone to Friday early dismissals, and now Friday afternoons, schools have the ability to work through collaborative response and professional learning. And then we build in some divisional time. So that has been integral from a division's perspective in terms of equity.
Well, and I think that really points to if we consider this work critically
Priority.
important for supporting the success of students, how do we reflect that? And we were just in a conversation earlier today where the person had made the realization or had made the assertion that if you want to understand what someone's priorities are, check out their timetable or check out their calendar. That's a pretty good indication of how are you spending your time. So Brita, we do want to turn then attention to you, and this is something I know that our listeners, viewers always appreciate, is hearing from different contexts. What does collaborative response look like specifically in your building? So if you could lay down, when does it happen? How have I grouped people into teams? What's the collaborative planning, collaborative team meetings, SST look like? Just try and paint a picture for us of what does collaborative response look like in your specific context.
Well, like Scott said, we're really fortunate this year because we have the early dismissal Friday. So being a small K-12, it was something we could never timetable in for ourselves. We just don't have the staffing to have a group of teachers free together all the time. So our collaborative response always happens on Friday afternoons. Because we're K-12, have a K-6 group and a 7-12 group. So when our K-6 is doing collaborative planning, our 7-12 are doing CTMs. The next following week they switch, so then we can attend the CTMs as well as after they get the collaborative planning going.
When you say we, who do you mean by we?
My vice principal and I.
Okay, so you're
We're
able
just a
to
small
be,
school.
Yeah, you're able to be in both teams' collaborative team meetings the way you've structured that.
Yes, we think that us attending the CTMs is valuable. So after my vice principal gets the collaborative planning going, he joins me in the CTM, just because we typically both teach on both sides of the building as well. So it's valuable for us to be in the CTMs. Plus then if someone's coming up at the CTMs, we can bring it to our school support team meetings, which we have scheduled every week. So every Monday I built into our timetable for myself, my vice principal, my learning support teacher, time where we have up to an hour. It's usually about 30 to 45 minutes together where we can go over all the school support team structures, as well as bring in our wellness and our Indigenous liaison if we need them. And then we do divisional every third. And then we also have a professional learning plan where we focus on a book study. So we rotate it so staff always know what's coming next. We have tracking documents. So if in the event we aren't able to make it, we can check back and see what everyone's action items are and make sure that we're all on task, as well as the staff have their pre-meeting organizers done in advance and have access to those at time. So because we're so far into this now, our staff have become a fine well-oiled machine because they come with their pre-meeting organizers, any data they've decided they need to bring up. They trust that if we see something coming up at our CTMs, we'll bring it up at a school support team meeting and come back to them later with different ideas or maybe divisional supports. So it's something that this half day Friday has really allowed us to grow, because before that it was very much before school, after school, when you could make it work at lunch. So we've got a very effective system for our K-12 right now.
So Brita, you talked about being able to be in those collaborative team meetings and how important it is for you and your assistant principal to be in those meetings. Tell us a little bit about what you learn when you're part of that and why it's so important.
It's valuable for us because while we do get the office referrals, so you'll see the kids you might be a little more frequent flyers to the office, it allows us more to focus on the academic issues you may not see in your day-to-day classroom supervision. So as teachers are working through what supports can we collectively do, how do we support the kids in this literacy area we're seeing as an issue in our data, it allows us to be part of those conversations, as well as then when we're in our supervision, asking how are you supporting them? We talked about this. Where do I see it in your classroom? It just allows a lot more follow-up, as well as it builds on that instructional leadership piece that we really value.
Does any of the conversations that happen in the collaborative team meeting, does that ever take you to, well, we need to explore this further in our professional learning, like that PD side of things? Do those ever overlap?
Yes, actually, that's a good question, because our entire secondary ended up, based on the early CTMs this year, taking our PL down the road of executive function. We're seeing
Yeah.
all of these lagging skills. How do we address them? So we've tailored our PL now to helping staff build their capacity so then they can take it back and support our students.
I was
That's
always
beautiful.
such a huge proponent of having administrators in the meeting because I found myself as a principal. Yeah, it helped me be aware of the student side of things, sure. And I already felt fairly confident in that, but it gave me such a pulse on the instructional conversations that were happening in the building. And when we bring up a key issue and say, what should we do? And it's crickets. Okay, well, we obviously need
identified a
professional
gap.
learning.
Yeah, it's been really helpful that way. And I didn't see that coming until this year, when it's like, well, that's a naturally occurring thing we can build into our PL plan now.
Well, and how much better is that then? It's relevant and in the moment, and you've got a structure to be able to address it.
So Brita, I do want to come back in a little bit because you've touched upon the collaborative structures and processes, about how we're starting to bring data and evidence. And there's another foundational component, of course, of our continuum of support. So I want for you to be able to share in a little bit of what that work has looked like. But before we get there, because you are talking about the strength of the structures and processes, Scott, I'd love for you to be able to share out what are some ways that at the divisional level, you've adopted, modeled some of the parallel processes, because I know that it's become part of your admin team meetings and also then your senior, like divisional leadership teams. Do you want to talk to us about both of those?
Yeah, for sure. I guess, and going back to Brita's comments, just in terms of that instructional leadership piece and how cloud response is really driving our professional learning, we're seeing the same impact at the division office as well, right? And I think what our administrators have found out is that they typically overplanned this year, not realizing just the impact that collaborative response would have on professional learning. And so some of the things we were going to do haven't come up as a higher priority, as kind of using Brita's example. At a division level, obviously for us, trying to model the importance of it at our level was just as important. If we're going to say it, this is important for our teachers and our school administrators to do. We wanted to model the same thing, and we need to be learning elbow to elbow. And so we've changed structures. I'll start with our admin CTM or admin PLC. Whenever we have administrators meeting once a month, our morning portion is always around professional learning. And so we've adjusted that, and this will be our second time coming up here in February, where we now have what we call an admin CTM. And so we've divided our administrators into teams. So we kind of have a team for K-6 schools. We have a team for K-9 schools, another team for the K-12 schools. And then a final team that kind of takes our junior high and senior high administrators together. We've supported them with either senior admin or some of our learning coaches or some of our program directors or coordinators. And we do pre-meeting organizers. Okay, what are the key issues that you're dealing with right now in your school? And we sit down and have a CTM. And same thing, we have all the templates, we have note takers, we have all the roles, we have facilitators. We come up with key issues and actions, and then we're going to come back. So we had our first one in January. No, was it January? Yeah, it was January. And so, no, December.
December.
Brita, is it December? Yes, December.
It was December.
Yeah, sorry. Can't keep track of my days, let alone months. And so we're going to come back to this on Wednesday and see kind of where our schools got to and start looking at new key issues or additional key issues.
So what might be, and just to help further clarify, what might be an example of a key issue that a school could bring up, for instance? We'll be right back to continue this episode. We have all felt like this before. when engaging in team meetings, feeling like our time is not being maximized or that this could have just been an email. As a leader, how can we ensure this is not the reality for everyone in the room? Rather than just simply coming together into a shared space, we really need to ensure that whenever we are engaging as a team in meetings, that the time is being utilized to its utmost and that we are truly seeing impact as a result of our conversations. My name is Kurtis Hewson, lead learner and co-founder of Jigsaw Learning. In this free on-demand webinar, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 planning considerations and then 5 facilitation considerations that you can put into place as a leader to take your team meetings to the next level. Access this webinar, and in addition to these 10 considerations, numerous free resources will be shared that you can begin using immediately. I can't wait to have you join me to learn how we can ensure that team meetings are having their optimal impact. And now back to our conversation.
So our focus actually in December CTM was around collaborative response implementation. And so some of the key issues that people talked about was, again, trying to balance something like, how do I make sure that my teachers have time for CTMs and collaborative planning? So if you use Brita's example where there's that rotation set into play where some teachers are going to be in a CTM, well, if I'm not in CTM, I'm doing collaborative planning, and vice versa. And so, some of those kinds of things schools are still trying to work around. And if we come up with that as a key issue, then we always strategize. Data would be another area that some schools are still struggling with, what are efficient and effective ways to collect data, to analyze data, to share data back. And we know there's lots of wisdom within the room, and sometimes just conversations weren't necessarily occurring other than maybe when, Kurtis or Lorna came and were doing our work with our PLC. So we're seeing that filter up to our early learning coordinator. She has implemented collaborative team meeting structures with all of her meetings when she's meeting with PUF staff or kindergarten teachers. Our director of student support services modeling the same pieces. So, we're trying to make sure that people don't see this as just a one-off in a school, but actually this is really kind of something that is just the way we do business in Grasslands.
Brita, as a principal, how did you find that experience really coming at it from a principal who participated in that? How was that for you?
Yeah, now as a participant rather than someone who has to lead it.
So it's interesting because when he was like, I don't remember what month it was, I do, it's December, because it made a huge impact on my January plan. So in my CTM with my other K-12 schools, one of the issues I had brought up that I had been really struggling with was, how do you get staff to focus on something new in their CTM without mandating it? And so we had kind of talked in the CTM group. I had brought the issue I had, we discussed it, and they were like, hey, why don't you try doing the locus of control? Talk with your staff, do the activity in January, and then maybe they'll naturally move on to something new, because my staff at the elementary level was really struggling with, let's focus on behavior, let's focus on behavior. And kids are never gonna be perfect, they're kids. So at what point do you push them onto maybe a more academic focus? And so they had said, hey, do this in January. So after we came back from Christmas break, I had done the locus of control activity we had planned during the CTM with the other admin. It went so well that my last CTM with elementary, they moved on to literacy without me pushing it, that they had a conversation on, like, we're focusing on this, maybe it's not something we can control. And it was like, I felt like we had staged it because it went so well based on how the admin CTM had run. And I think in years past as an administrator in our little breakout sessions, we would never have had such clear directive goals and an action item and for something for me to try leaving that meeting. But having set the timeline and my action item was do it right when you come back, and I did, and then it worked out. So I'm actually really excited for our meeting in February because I can go back and report and be like, look at this, it changed because of this one thing we tried.
Well,
that's beautiful.
This is so central to the collaborative response work, is understanding there's expertise in the room and how do we leverage it appropriately. And then me walk away with one thing that I'm willing to try. There's an action, and through that actioning, it may not work, but I'll learn something else. It's just that iterative continuing along.
Well, and we have learned, and we're just working with so many different people that key issues process, and of course there's a real intention to it within our collaborative team meetings, but it always comes to the identify an issue that's occurring and then having that opportunity to access the expertise in the room. So that might look like we do, of course, in a collaborative team meeting, we're doing that around students, but like you just shared, being able to do that around a concern that you're having around implementation within collaborative response for admin, or for, as Scott mentioned, early learning, how Erin is using that same process to be able to do some problem solving as well, understanding that we have so many wonderful people with wonderful ideas that we sometimes don't have a process to access. So that key issues process can be used in so many different ways.
Well, Brita, this actually is a great place where we can come back and revisit the continuum of supports work, because I'd love to hear how that has rolled out within the school and where you're at in regards to that foundational component.
Yeah, so it's something we're quite proud of as a staff. So early on in our collaborative response journey, when we had started the book study, we had valued creating a continuum, just something that our staff really needed, as well as in Bassano, our staff had been here 20 to 30 years. So as people were retiring and new staff were coming in, we wanted something that new staff could also take and be like, this is how we do business at Bassano School. This is what our tier 1, 2, and 3 look like. So as a staff, we sat down, we did the Post-its on what are our tier 1 supports, our tier 2, our tier 3. We sorted them out after a few sessions, narrowed down to what do we collectively K to 12 do? What are some things that would move to tier 2? We have little branches that break off. So here's the data you need to be collecting before you can move to tier 2. And then we actually brought it to our Indigenous liaison, who, because we have our Indigenous population, gave us some feedback on making it, instead of a pyramid, it's more of a flow. So ours looks like a river in various stages of blue. So you can move up and down as you need to. And then it's a little more inclusive that way for our students, and our staff quite enjoy it. And we bring it to all our meetings, we have it out, and it's just a piece of work we're all really proud of, because it shows these are all the steps we have in it. Here's who you can reach out to. Here's the data you collect before you need to move on. And it really fuels good conversations around, have we tried all these things, as well as allows staff to work through what's my next steps before I move on to tier 2 or 3.
Brita, would you be, and we can follow up after this podcast, but willing to share a sample of that with us? Because I know that's something listeners and viewers would love to be able to see, if we could pop a version of that in the show notes. It's a really nice way to segue in to another layer of collaborative response that you've put at the divisional level, that it's not just different departments have structured it within their departments, and that we have principal CTMs that are happening. But talk to us a little bit about how you're utilizing collaborative response to focus on the needs of schools, using the same structures that schools use to focus on the needs of kids.
So we in the last number of years, we've had what we call instructional leadership team meetings. And so 3 times a year, myself and our 2 assistant superintendents and our director of student services will schedule meetings to meet with our school administrators. And in the past, we kind of had, more of a focus, I'd say, on things like their school improvement plans, the actions they've been taking in terms of professional learning. And so in the last couple of years, again, kind of working with Jigsaw and Lorna specifically, we kind of restructured that to actually have an opportunity to pose questions related to our work around collaborative response. That again aligns with our strategic goals and plans within goals within our own 3-year plan. And so the questions we pose allow our administrators to talk about and share either some of the successes that they're having in terms of their work around collaborative response, some of the challenges they're having. Once those meetings are done, then we pull in our learning team individuals, which is, again, our early learning coordinator, our learning coaches, Sean, Katie, and Nicole and myself, and we debrief around what we've heard to try and look at, okay, so where are our schools around some of our structures and processes? And then are there areas that maybe we can provide support? So again, kind of looking at key issues that we may be hearing. Out of that, we have been able to, for example, this year, we contracted some additional services through Maryland, which allows our schools to either get some additional support and expertise, which maybe we can't always provide. Sometimes there are things that we can actually address by connecting our principals with other principals, It may be something where somebody from our early learning team or our student support services team can go out and provide some additional conversations and support. So at a district level, our instructional leadership team meetings have made a bit of a shift so that our collaborative response work is kind of taking the same process of key questions, key issues, and then what can be some follow-up supports that we've been able to put in place. So very exciting for us in terms of how we structured it, because the conversations with administrators are usually, first of all, very enlightening, but really a great opportunity to look at celebrations, which is a big part of collaborative response, because our schools and our administrators have been doing some phenomenal work. And again, very different context. If you're a small school K-9 and you have 40 students doing collaborative response and collaborative team meetings and student support team meetings and all those structures, it looks very different than even in Brita's school of 255 students, or scale that up to our composite high school where there's over 600 students. So it helps us to understand that, one model doesn't necessarily fit, but we can tweak the model and processes to align so that every school still has some form of the processes and layers of structures in place that allows us still to have common conversations.
So Scott, how has that changed how the team at the district level is deployed?
So yeah, a couple of things that we've been able to do. So again, depending on what we're hearing from individual schools or supports, we have been able to sometimes support them with our learning coaches. And so we've been able to send a learning coach or two out to a school and say, look, here sounds like something that maybe we can support you with. Obviously the support that we get from Jigsaw around things like Maryland's expertise. Last year we had the CTM observations, which allowed us again to look at something specific within that structure that school administrators were able to get some support on. This year, the part that's going to be really fun to kind of follow along is when we're actually doing our school reviews. And so we have 6 schools that will actually have an opportunity to work with Kurtis and look at those structures from a broad perspective, and then narrow down into some of those real specific pieces that, again, maybe we can support them through either individuals within the division, or we can provide them with resources through the website, our membership on the website, or within maybe some of the personnel from Jigsaw Learning.
We have a couple questions that we'd like to ask both of you as we start to come to a conclusion here today. The first one is for you to think about and finish this statement, and whoever would like to go first for it, please do. For the statement, as a result of collaborative response, we have seen. How would you finish that?
More structured supports for our students, both academically and behaviorally.
Oh, that was a succinct answer.
Well done, Brita. That was excellent.
He kind of set the stage high for you there, Scott. So
He always does. That's the thing about Brita. Yeah, she's fantastic. We're very lucky to have her. She kind of pushes you to be better. There's no doubt. For us, I would say it's really about having systemic fidelity. I would say that it's allowed us to make sure that it's not some kids getting supports in a real structured way. It's about ensuring that all students in all of our schools have the ability to receive interventions and supports when required. And then in addition to that, I would say that it has allowed our staff to all feel like they've got supports and mechanisms in a way that they're not doing this work on their own, because it's much too complex. And so that ability to feel like there's a team approach in every building, not because you have economies of scale or because you have more staff, that it doesn't matter which building you're in Grasslands, you're going to have the supports to make a difference for kids.
we had a principal that said, if you're trying to do this work on your own, it's a recipe for burnout, whether that's a teacher, a principal, an individual school. It needs that.
The phrase that always comes to mind when I'm working with you and the teams in Grasslands is rowing in the same direction. Like, you truly are living that, we are all in this together and we're all supporting each other and we're all trying to get to the same place. And that has, I think that's amazing to be able to bring along, 14 schools, and being able to keep moving in that same way is pretty astounding.
And I think recognizing that even though we've been doing this for a number of years, that we have some schools like Brita's that is, farther along, and we have other schools that are still trying to figure it out. We've had lots of changes in administrators in our buildings. And so They're trying to put their own personalized experiences into it, as well as trying to pick up from other individuals who maybe led the school previously. So recognizing that we also need to give ourselves some grace, and that it's okay for us to be in different places, but with the expectation that we're continuing to move forward and grow. So to me, that makes a good combination. We've got a little bit of pressure to keep things moving, but lots of support to get there.
Absolutely.
I would also say it's nice in the fact that I know it will exist beyond me. So it's structures that will have occur once I'm no longer principal here and won't go away because it's a division initiative. So the staff will put all this work in and it'll continue past my time as a principal here.
Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah, that legacy that goes beyond your time. That's true.
Okay, here's the last
question.
question that we will tee up. So we love asking people that come on the podcast this question of, in the spirit of, if you knew then what you know now, what advice would you give your past self in relation to collaborative response?
Honestly, if I could go back to 2015 when we brought Kurtis in to speak to us about it, and I think this is what you learn over time when you're in leadership positions, and that really is just, we really should have had more of a focused approach and a long-term plan. I think divisions are great about, you jump on something, you do it for a little while, and then something else comes up. And I think the difference this year, or this time, is, this is now year 3, and we have been dedicated to it. We've resourced it with money and time and people. And we would have been farther ahead had we done that in 2015 instead of waiting until 2019. So to me, that would have been the difference, is we should have just jumped on knowing that it was good for everybody, not just a few.
Thanks, Scott. Brita?
I would say go slow to go fast, because there's so many important pieces to the work, but you don't need to implement it all at once. You don't need to jump into CTMs, collaborative planning, school support team meetings.
And add data and evidence in a continuum next week as well.
Yeah. You look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many things, but there's not. It's just, if you add them slowly, you can do them well versus trying to do them all at once and then watching it all be mediocre. So I think for us, it's been good because we've kind of gone slow, but I would go back and go even slower. Start with this piece, do that well, then move on to the next piece.
Brita, as you talk about that, I think about the connections that are made when you go slowly too, that it's not just about being able to do all those 3, collaborative structures and processes and data and evidence. And now we'll move on to continuum.
Or you create, this is our checklist and check.
But rather it's, okay, so we'll create our structures, but how are they connected to the data and evidence? And how is that influencing data and evidence? But it takes time and intention to make sure that it's all connecting. And those pieces are impacting the other components too.
Well, I want to take a moment just to say thank you so much, not just for joining us for this podcast, but for the great work that is happening within Grasslands for your students and staff. And it's not just as someone hearing the story, but living through it with you for a number of years. It's truly phenomenal, the work that your teams are doing. So thank you so much for taking a portion of time to be able to share it out with the larger world.
Yeah, and honestly, thank you for all your supports, and thank you for the time allowing us to share a little bit of our story. We couldn't do it without you, obviously. That is an absolute integral part. So both of you have been amazing, and your support has definitely been appreciated. So thank you.
Well, thank you, both of you, Brita and Scott, and our partners are going to be super excited to be able to hear your journey. So
and we can also let people know that at our retreat that's happening in Lacombe in May, you'll both be there to be able to share this story in person. If anyone has questions, come and join us there. We'll be right back to continue this episode. Are you looking to maximize the collaborative capacity of your school or district? Are you wanting to take your professional learning communities or response to intervention work to the next level? Have you started the work in collaborative response but are looking to reignite your plans? We want to have you join us at the 2024 Collaborative Response Retreat happening May 3rd and 4th in beautiful Lacombe, Alberta.
Over the 2 days, we have an intentionally designed program of breakout sessions, panel discussions, and supported team planning time to ensure that you walk away with a plan for introducing or strengthening collaborative response in your organization for the upcoming year. With a concentrated focus on team planning, networking, and individualized support, the Collaborative Response Retreat is an outstanding opportunity to grow your team's understanding and implementation of this powerful support framework. We are also planning some fun social times so you can relax and enjoy some activities as a team in our historic community of Lacombe in central Alberta.
In addition, participants will gain access to an extensive repository of online resources to deepen their understanding and support ongoing implementation. Plan to join a growing network of educators dedicated to responding to the diverse needs of their learners. We've capped our attendance at 140 participants, so make sure to register early to secure your team spot. We're looking forward to seeing you in Lacombe in May. And now back to our conversation. So we're really excited to have you part of that.
And we're bringing 2 other people who are going to do all the talking, right, Brita?
Oh, that's 100%
Oh, yeah.
my vice principal's coming.
You've done yours
You've
now.
done your talking. Yeah, them. All right.
That's
Well,
right.
thank you so much. And we wish you all the best moving forward. Thanks, Brita. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you for having us.
All right. So as we reflect on that conversation, there's not much there that surprises us because we work so frequently with Brita and Scott, and especially you over the past number of years have got to know them so well. But, you know, when Scott reflects on the, I wish I knew then what I know now, reflection comment, we hear this over and over again of when we see the work stick with fidelity, it's because there's been a plan and an understanding that it takes time for implementation. And Brita reflected that as well, that go slow to go fast. It takes time. This is not about putting every single piece in place as soon as you can. It's that constant evolution and taking the next step when ready.
Yeah. And I'll go back to the statement that I mentioned before about rowing in the same direction, and that this is a district who really has very intentional ways of implementing collaborative response, and they are very much on the same page. But as Scott mentioned, they're at different places in their journey all across the division.
Oh, and I loved what he talked about with the pressure, but grace at the same time.
Yeah, and it totally is. From the district level and their participation, it is about how do we help you? How do we support you in your journey as a school and as a school leader to get to that next step? And so though that real clarity of their intention and intentionality in their implementation. Just amazing.
I do have to say, though, it's one thing to be able as a system leader or a system leadership team to say this is important and we're going to involve all schools. It's one more step when you're saying, and we're implementing the structures and processes as well. We're seeing impact when a school says we've struggled with this. They can come back, and we've seen this in multiple places where division leaders can say, yeah, us too. We struggled with that as well. And everyone is on that path to learning. And again, collaboratively responding to the needs that are surfacing, whether it's the needs of a student, the needs of a leader, or the needs of a school.
Yeah, and when you think about the multiple levels where they have engaged collaborative response, engaged the structures and processes to really enhance what they were doing previously with their school division. So we're talking early learning support structures have changed. The way that the school division is supporting their schools, that's changed. How they lead their admin council, like so many things have been impacted because they are truly set out on this path.
And when you say changed, it's not from they were lousy before and good. It's
It's
just
alignment.
enhancement and alignment and continual growth.
Yeah.
So once again, thanks so much to Brita and Scott for joining. We'd love for you, if you've appreciated this episode, please leave a comment, subscribe. We'd love for you to be able to share it with one friend that you think would value from this. In the show notes, there's some links to additional resources. We will get the continuum from Bassano School in there as part of it as well. And as you heard in the podcast, we have at our 2024 Collaborative Response Retreat opportunity, we have 15 different schools and school divisions that will be sharing their story.
Very
A
exciting.
great way to be able to network and hear this through multiple lenses, through multiple schools and school divisions. So with that, thank you so much for joining us for yet another episode of Leading Collaborative Response, and we wish you all the best moving forward in this work.
See you soon.